Hi, Claire. Are you there?
I'm here, yes.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited about this topic because I think so many people in the world are in the situation you used to be in, uh, and you've overcome it. So I'd love to learn how you did that. And of course, everyone listening in would love to as well. I should put you out of the mystery here. It's how you became debt free in 12 months is the topic for what we're talking about today. So I mean, it's such a big topic. I can't wait to hear your story. But thank you for being willing to share.
Of course, I'm really excited.
So, do you want to just maybe put this into context first? I guess the most important question is, who are you and how did you get into debt in the first place?
Well, I shouldn't have gotten into debt because I was pretty frugal up until post college, or mid college. I saved up for my car and, my parents matched what I saved. So luckily I didn't have a car loan. I applied for scholarships all throughout college. So I came out with some student loans, but very little compared to the average American. But my real pitfall was credit cards. So I had a travel addiction and I got very swept up in the miles game of sign up for this credit card and get the 50,000 miles free. So I did get a lot of free flights, but I never paid off the balances. And so I just kept signing up for new cards, um, kind of having this vague idea of the balance that I was creating, but never really logging in to look. And so, yeah, it was a kind of a lack of education that I never really received because it's not taught in our education system how to handle our money. I got mailed my first credit card in the mail when I was 18 with, here's your first 500, have fun. Um, and then it just kept going from there. I think I got up to like 14 or 15 credit cards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, I know you can have a lot of credit cards, but did you like spend a lot of money as well?
I never crazy balances, but it was, not huge balances spread out across all those cards. And so, I would use the one card to book a trip to one country. I'd use that credit card while I was there, and then move on to the next country. So I ended up hitting like 18 countries in 3 years. And so they were dispersed. Among the 3 years and among those 18 countries. So I was justifying it with, all the free miles that I was earning, and the money I was quote unquote saving. But just, no, I had never learned. And I was 22, around 21 at the
Mm,
time. I was still pretty young and I just never learned about compound interest and how it can be amazing when it works for you and so horrible when it's working against you. And so the interest was just killing me and I didn't even realize it.
wow. Yeah, I guess that could be a shock too, and daunting at 22 years old to wake up to all this debt. Um, can you maybe explain, the turnaround, and then obviously we're here to share how you got out of it, but I'd love to know about the turnaround and then what was your actual goal at the start when you first wanted to make this change.
Yes. So I was actually um, in a relationship at the time, and the my partner was very money conscious and wanted to have all these conversations about debt and net worth and student loans and looking towards the future in with finances. And so I really credit him for the turning point of him pushing. He was actually the very first person I told that I had debt. And then beyond that, um, I I realized through that relationship that it had been this secret that I was carrying with me. So it was this burden that I always felt was weighing on me. I had this like mild level anxiety all the time, just knowing that that debt was there. And so I just started. First, I told my mom, and then I told my dad, and because it's a very shameful thing. By all appearances, I'm traveling the world, and I got a
Mm,
job teaching after traveling, and everything looked okay. But then there's just this number hanging over you. And so I just started telling people. And of course, you tell someone a secret that feels so weighty to you, and no one really cared. No one really thought of me any differently, but it became easier to talk about with every person that I told. So then it just made me think a lot about the relationship that we all have with money. It's the one relationship we all have for our whole lives, whether we like it or not. And just how keeping that a secret can elicit so much shame. And so it also makes me wonder, so much about appearances. Like, what are the real numbers behind the scenes that we don't see, based on just the perception we have of people in their lives?
So your boyfriend and the fact that you told other people in your family was what triggered the desire to change it? Or because it sounds like no one reacted like you got to change it. It was more maybe the shame. I'm not sure what was the motivation, both the emotional side as well.
Yeah, it was the both and. It
Okay.
was definitely a lot of surprise because, again, by all appearances, it looked like I had it together. But then it was so personal. I was just sick of carrying that around with me. It became heavier to do nothing about it than to actually face it head on. And so I just got to the point of being sick and tired. And so, um, that was the pivotal turning point. But what led into the motivation was just staring it all in the face, and looking at it to see what the numbers actually were. And then I became obsessed. I just wanted to get rid of all the debt as fast as possible.
Okay. So you looked at the number of how much you were in debt, and the motivation kicks in. What was like the goal, especially at the beginning? Because I can imagine you felt more overwhelmed at that point because it's a big number. But what goal did you set yourself at that point?
At that point, I set 2 years. I had
2 years to get debt free,
to,
or
to get out of debt. Yep.
okay? Was that like, I don't know what the situation was back then, but did that seem realistic or unbelievable? Like it when you say that number?
So I was teaching as a part-time college instructor. And so I was making $30K a year pre-tax. And so pretty low. And then my debt total was less than my income, but not that much less than my income. So that felt daunting. But I felt like if I really organized and got clear and really made sacrifices for those 2 years, that it would be doable. And so I can, go into all of those steps, but that's
Yeah.
where I started at.
Well, I'd love to. Okay, so the goal was in 2 years to get debt free. That's nice and simple and clear, at least. And obviously the before and after here. Well, what did you end up achieving?
Say that again at the end of the year.
Well, not at the end of the year, but in terms of your outcome. If you set it for 2 years, what did you like? What was the result? How did you go?
Yeah. So I I hit my goal 1 year in, which completely surprised me. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I just began educating myself like ferociously. I think the what did I achieve and the how I did it kind of go hand in hand.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I hit the goal in 1 year, and then, getting out of debt is amazing. But then it does kind of put you at a neutral spot because now you're okay, back to a clean slate. And so then at the 1 year point, I realized I was debt free. I made my last payment, which felt amazing. And then I was able to look more at saving and investing and boosting my income. So that's
Mm.
what I ended up doing in the second year.
So it's safe to say, not only did you get debt free, but you became good at making or saving, and I don't know, maybe doing a lot with a little. Like what else did you kind of achieve beyond just getting out of debt?
Yes. So this is the four steps that if I'm happy to talk about.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's dive in. I mean, I'm guessing it's all interwoven, but I'm assuming it'd be like, you mindset, practical skills. I mean, I'm curious. Maybe we should like go through it and we can sort of surface the achievements by going through the steps, because if we summarize them, maybe it's kind of spoils the ending in some ways, or
Right.
spoils the process. So, okay, well, yeah, let's start from day zero. What did you do first?
Okay. So the four steps that I became very clear as I was doing them, and then super clear in hindsight, was to organize, minimize, optimize, maximize. So I love systems. So
Did you know
beginning with
those at the start though, or did you come up with them way later?
no hindsight, I realized what I did and applied these cute words to the steps. Yeah, first organizing was again just looking at all my balances, what I had in every account. Um, a lot of people have this vague idea of what their balances are, how much money they have, but you really don't know until you write it all down. So the first thing I did was figure out my net worth, which is essentially just assets minus liabilities, or everything you own minus what you owe. And that way you have to write down all of, what's in your account, how much is your car worth, what's the equity on your house. I did not have a house at the time. And then write down all your credit card balances, loan balances, any other debts, subtract those from your assets. So, of course, my net worth was negative when I started. But after working with financial clients, I found this is very normal. But that initial organization helped me a ton. And then part of that organizing was tracking my incoming and outgoing expenses for a few months. I didn't even try to create a budget at that point. I actually don't believe in strict budgets because they rely a lot on willpower, which I think isn't very sustainable. So I just tracked everything coming in and going out, which you can do just by, if you put everything on one card, you can print out the statement balances and track it that way, or you can, write down every time you make a purchase. There's a few ways to do that. But that was the organizing, just kind of getting to ground zero and seeing where I was at after years of ignoring it. And
Did
then, yeah,
did you do that just literally like open up all the statements and then write numbers onto like Notepad on your computer, or was there any kind of tools you used at that point for collecting it all?
I used Google Sheets to house everything. So, I had 30 tabs open. It was logged into every credit card account. A lot of it's just like tedious tracking down login information, right? Of accounts I hadn't been in for a while. Pulling up every account, seeing what the balance was in everything. Yeah, Kelly Blue Book, figuring out the value of my car. Everything went into the Google Sheet, and just that alone brought so much more relief than I thought it would, because it's empowering just to have all of the facts in front of you.
Right. So you have all your owed money, the
Mhm.
value of any assets you have, like the car with the Kelly Blue Book. Are there any other things you need to value using, like, I don't know how you'd value like your furniture and things like that. Did you go that far?
You can, but I didn't. The main things are, liquidity, cash on hand, investments if you have them, which I did not at the time, your car and your house. Those are the big ones. They
Okay.
say, if you have jewelry or antiques, you can have those, but I didn't.
So your asset list was basically car and that was it?
That car and meager savings.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay. So, like you said, you've got a statement of ground zero, and you felt empowered by that. So what happened next?
Yes. So then step two was to minimize. So then I went through all of that and I asked myself the question, what do I actually love to spend money on, and what do I hate to spend money on? And I let myself keep a few favorites. Like, I spend so much money on food, and I decided I didn't want to skimp in that area. But I really didn't care what kind of clothes I wear, so I was happy to really cut back in that area. So with the goal being to, look for the couple things that add that much value to your daily life and your overall happiness, and then ruthlessly cut out as much as possible. And then, people say like, well, what about utilities? What about Wi-Fi, the boring purchases? And we actually have pretty neutral feelings and emotion around those things because they're just kind of non-negotiables. So then within the minimizing step going through and either canceling subscriptions if you have them. So I canceled all my like media subscriptions, or I borrowed other people's login information for them. And then calling the Wi-Fi company, the phone company, the car insurance company, my renter's insurance, every single bill you have, and negotiating down a lower rate. I was able to do that with everything.
How do you do that? Like, how do you negotiate?
Yeah, so it's never asking a yes or no question. So it's always making a statement, which requires them to elaborate in their response for why they can't do it. So instead of, can you help me lower my bill, which would lead to an easy no, you say, I've been a loyal customer for this many years and I've always paid my bill on time, and I've been looking around at other options, but I really like if you can lower my bill for me. And that's a much harder thing to say no to. And then once I learned that their acquisition cost for getting new customers is often way higher than it is to retain customers, that knowledge, you can threaten to cancel and you can get a deal pretty fast. And so it just continued to work. Sometimes it wouldn't work with one agent. So I would hang up and call and get a different agent, and it would work that time.
What kind of like reductions can you expect by doing that?
Yeah, my Wi-Fi went from 80 to 40. My phone, I went from 70 to 30. There's just some plans that you don't even realize are available. My car insurance, I went from 90 to 30. Renters from like 30 to 20. Just wherever what you're essentially doing is finding extra money without even talking about increasing your income yet. So it's really, I found it fun.
Yeah, interesting. And that's all staying with the same companies too. That's not like jumping ship.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't want you to.
Okay. All right. So you're reducing, and I like the idea of putting like an emotional stamp on what you really like versus what you're neutral versus what you don't really need. I'm curious, what did you find that you didn't really need that might have surprised you? Is there anything you can think of?
Yes. Well, again, I don't believe in the like kill yourself until you're out of debt mindset. Like you have to have some luxury and some rewards and some treats as you go. I just want to be miserable for 2 years.
Mm.
And so the things I and were eating out and just buying really groceries. And so I was never going to remove those. The things I realized I didn't like spending money on was alcohol. I just always felt awful after buying like a $20 cocktail. I'm happy to buy used clothes, so I just stopped buying new clothes. I actually moved to Buffalo, New York, so the cost of living there is really, really low, coming from Chicago and New York City, and so I was able to get my rent down really low for those 2 years. And then I actually lived without Wi-Fi for 2 years, but I know that's really extreme.
Yeah, that would be one of the hard ones for me to give up. Just you broke out a little bit on the things you didn't want to give out. Was that eating out and?
Oh, eating out and buying really good groceries.
Okay, so food. Basically, you didn't want to give up on your standard of living for food,
Exactly.
but for drinks, going out, where you live, those sorts of things you were quite happy, or not happy, but willing to do for a period of time.
Yeah, and I didn't miss them, so it didn't feel like a sacrifice, and that's where the mindset thing comes in.
Does it help maybe too that you tell yourself it's not forever? It's like a timestamp on it?
It does, but I still today, even though I could easily buy all those things, I still don't. So it's actually really freeing to just have this filter for when you're making spending decisions for, is this something I love or don't really love, instead of thinking of it as a need versus want. I also realized once I moved to Portland, where the public transportation is really good, I realized I didn't really want or need a car. And so, it gets annoying once in a while, but my transportation costs now are super low, which allows me to put that money towards the things I love, which is still travel and food.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's step 2, right?
Step 2 is minimize. Yep.
Minimize. Okay. Anything in terms of like tools or products you made use of to do this? Like, was it something that helped you, I don't know, even find the better deals for all these things you're looking at? Or
Yeah, there were two things in there. There's a net worth calculator through NerdWallet, which is wonderful, but there's a few online. If you just Google net worth calculator, that can, if you want to skip Google Sheets and Excel, which I know some people hate, it just is really easy to figure out your net worth quickly. I did a bunch of money type and money spending quizzes. My favorite is moneytype.me, where it shows kind of what your mindset is around money overall. Some people really enjoy being frugal. Some people really enjoy spending lavishly. Some people want a really hands-off budget. Some people want to be super hands-on and on top of every penny. So figuring out those things as I went were the really the only tools at this point.
so the second one helps you figure out your kind of default way of spending money or saving money. What happens if you turn out you love spending money when you do that test on yourself? What are you screwed in that case? Or
No, you still want to get out of, and so you still ask that question. I love spending money on. The idea being that you actually can afford almost anything, but you can't afford everything. No one can. And so it's just figuring out like where do I want to put my money, which is again a really empowering question because you're choosing where you want it to go instead of it always being default or reactive.
yeah, that's really good. I like the idea that you're not giving you the challenge of willpower to restrict everything. You're just giving yourself a hierarchy of what you value and sticking with the things that you value the most. You don't have to lose those. And then, yeah, where you don't have the emotional, like it's even willpower, I'm assuming is still involved, but it's much easier to have willpower and things you don't emotionally have a strong connection or power over you almost. So that's interesting. Um, Okay, so just to recap, there too in the tools, there was just a calculator tool with NerdWallet, and then an emotional assessment tool. What was the website for that again? Sorry,
It's called moneytype.me.
moneytype.me. Interesting. Never heard of that one. Okay, step three. So I'm guessing now step two, you've minimized the outgoings, so you've got more available from whatever income you've got. What do you do next?
Exactly. So all the money that I quote unquote found when I minimized and cut back, I put into a savings buffer. And so um, part of the organizing phase and the minimizing phase actually is looking where you're storing your money. And so I consider the accounts that I use as tools because there are some accounts that are so awful and some that are wonderful. And so during the first two steps, I moved all of my checking money into a Charles Schwab high yield investor checking account. And this account is amazing because you can withdraw money from any ATM and they waive the ATM fee. They pay you interest in your checking account, which is unheard of. There's no foreign transaction fees. They have amazing customer service, unlimited checkbooks, just amazing. Versus before, I was paying the $5 monthly maintenance fee with KeyBank, and just it's wasted money. So I consider that a great tool, and that has kind of become the hub of my money. And then also Ally savings account. You want to find a high yield interest savings account. So Ally is between like 1.5 and 2% interest. And so now step three is optimize. So you've organized, you've minimized. You can begin to optimize by beginning to automate everything. So going back to what you said about willpower, this is where you're removing willpower even more. So I'm looking at paying my bills that I have now that I've reduced all of those rates a lot. I'm going to pay those automatically so I don't even have to think about them every month. I'm going to send a certain amount of cash to my savings account every month. And, in the vein of always paying yourself first. And then paying off my debts. So you may have heard of the debt snowball, but it's categorizing all of your debts from the smallest balance to the largest balance. Some people will also do the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate because math-wise, that makes a little bit more sense. But I really like the smallest balance to the largest balance because the psychological benefit of knocking out one debt at a time is really big. And so once you see that you can, get rid of that first one, the money that you were putting towards that first balance then rolls into the second, and you continue to roll and that's how I knock those all out in a year.
That's the snowball part. That's cool. Is there a time to consolidate though? Like, would you pay off like all of one debt by using another form of debt just to get it all in one place? Does that ever make sense? Because I've heard people do that.
You can. Statistically, you are just as likely to get into debt again because a lot of people will use consolidation as a Band-Aid, where it does feel good to put it all in one place. But it really, in the long term, because the goal is to never to go back into debt again. You don't want to continue to have to pay off debt. And so it's been shown that it doesn't help help the habits stick versus keeping them separate. You see that, okay, because of course you're going to pay the minimum balance. Say that I have 12 balances. I'm still going to pay the minimum balances on all 12, but I'm going to put a little bit more towards balance number 1. Then I pay that off. I'm going to now put what I was putting there into 2 while paying the minimum amount on all the others. So it's a way more intentional way to feel like you're checking them off and really knocking them off one at a time.
Does the interest rate though come into this?
It can, if it's a choice between credit cards and student loans, then even if you're, you do want to try and knock off the interest rate that's highest up front. It doesn't really matter. The point is to just have a plan. Some people are more math driven, and so they will start with the highest interest rate first. But if you feel like you've tried to get out of debt in the past and it hasn't worked, then that's when starting with the lowest balance is the best psychologically.
That's interesting because I know, I've seen the late night commercials about consolidating your debt into, or on a website commercial even, consolidating your debt to get the interest rate down. Like, because credit cards can be like 20% interest, where a bank loan can be 8% interest, and student debt obviously can be like 3% interest or whatever. And that I thought would be, okay, that makes sense to consolidate, but I never really considered, doesn't matter. Maybe you do all that, but you simply don't have the, the right mindset. So you're not capable of actually paying down anything very well, where you were kind of pointing out that feeling of getting something closed off, like completing a debt payment creates the snowball effect, like that you were saying, which enforces what you're doing, which keeps you at it, which might actually create the habit you need to get out of debt. So I do wonder, and I guess this is more like a personal preference, are you more motivated to find the absolute lowest interest and construct the debt the best way you can in terms of interest rates and consolidation? That works for you. Or maybe the best way is just to find some sort of positive reinforcement that keeps you doing the right thing. Like, that's what's more important for you. Does that make sense?
No, that's exactly it. Yes. And I've worked with clients who are kind of interest hoppers. And so they will just continually consolidate and chip away and then consolidate again and chip away. And, they want you to be lured in by smaller and smaller interest rates because they want your business. And that's, if you're really math driven and math, that motivates you for sure. Neither way is wrong. But it's statistically, you have more success with seeing the balances actually go away.
Interesting. Did not know that. Okay. One thing I'm curious about though, you've got these 2 bank accounts, you're starting to snowball to pay off each of the 12, in your case, sources of debt. How do you decide though what to put into a savings buffer and keep there, for you first? What proportion to put towards debts? What proportion is your actual living expenses and that food habit you've got in your case, Claire? Like, how did you figure that out?
So that happened when I did my incoming and outgoing tracking.
Okay.
And so, I'm seeing what comes in and what goes out. And then what goes out changes because I've now, negotiated down all of those amounts. So then you just see what's left after I've paid, the non-negotiables like rent and utilities and all of those things. Then I have, of course, food is a non-negotiable, but it's you can splurge on in different ways. You leave room for those couple things that are really you still want to spend money on, and then you just see what you have left. And so that was the amount that after you're paying off your minimum balances of your debt, it's not much, but negotiating down those outgoing amounts helps a lot. And so that's the power of organizing your money. You think you have no money to save, but once you organize it, you do, even if it's just $50 a month to start. And then you can slowly increase that amount.
Right. So there's no rules like you need to save 10% for you and then 10% for living expenses and the 80% goes to your debts or anything like that.
No, the only hard and fast rules are definitely pay the minimum balances on your debt and more, again, at whatever's at the top of the snowball. And then make savings a non-negotiable, again, to build the muscle of savings. And this was another turning point for me. It was so hard for me to save money until I envisioned my future self and that I would be like an older person someday. And so your savings is a gift that you give to your future selves to remove that much stress, to all of life's predictable unpredictables that we know come up.
That's a nice way of putting it. A gift to your future self. I like that. Okay, so that's step 3. Any other tools besides the bank accounts at that point? There's no system for reminding you when minimum repayments are required, things like that? Or is it just you log into your bank account every day just to make sure you don't miss something? What do you do?
You can. So a lot of people have asked me about apps. I've found that generally they're more of a distraction. Adding in, budgeting apps like Mint or anything like that isn't really necessary. So the most important thing is making sure that the bank accounts you choose have a good app on your phone that is has a Touch ID, which sounds really simple, but you want to remove any friction and any barrier from the process as much as you can. And so, eventually you're going to get to the point. I never even, I look at my bank account now maybe once a month because everything is going where it's supposed to go. I've created this well-oiled machine with all my accounts. But in the beginning, you want to, of course, be checking your balances. And so just having them ready on hand, just with a finger touch is really helpful. The only other tool I used in there is another calculator on Credit Karma. It's the debt repayment calculator, which it shows how much faster you will get out of debt if you add a little bit more to that initial balance. And it's huge. You can cut off months of the time by just adding like $20 more a month will cut off several months. It's amazing.
This well-oiled machine that you've got running now, is that just setting up automatic transfers in your bank accounts?
Yes. So at the time I was getting direct deposit. So that comes into my Charles Schwab checking account. Then automatically, so that is my hub now, my checking account. Automatically money gets sent out to my savings account. Money was getting sent out to pay all the minimum balances of my credit card, plus a little bit extra to that first balance, which I had to, manually change. And then that leaves me with this amount that is for, the not recurring expenses. When I go to the grocery store, all the random expenses that come throughout the month. And so that if you send the stuff out automatically, like your willpower won't do that consistently. So automating is really powerful. And then you're left with exactly what you get to spend for that month.
And I know this is a rudimentary question, but inside this Charles Schwab bank account, is it because I'm assuming there's 12 different credit cards here. So you're dealing with 12 different other companies. Can you create an external payment for 12 different other places like that using that account?
Oh yeah. It's my favorite account.
Okay.
Yep. As many as you need to.
Yeah, because I'm obviously I'm in Canada and you're in the States, so we have different banking systems. And I'm trying to think. I think I can. I'm just not sure. I've never had to do 12 at the same time. So, yeah, I could imagine it's fun for you to even set that up, and the sense of accomplishment of knowing that you don't have to think about that must be a positive step as well.
Exactly. Your money is working for you. And the main question I get for this third step, the optimizing and automating, is if you don't have that initial buffer in your checkings account, it can feel a little anxiety inducing to know that things are automatically getting sent out when you're not sure if enough money is even in there, especially if you're self-employed and your income fluctuates a lot. So that's where, when you're in step 2 and you're minimizing any of the money that you quote unquote find, you're gathering up and putting into that savings buffer. So it gives you that initial foundation to then automate from.
Okay, cool. I think we're moving on to the final step now then. So this is all happening, all this automation. What was the word for this step 3?
This is optimize.
Optimize. Okay, so you've optimized, and then what's step 4?
So step 4, so now I've organized, I've cut back by minimizing, and I've optimized. So everything's going where it's supposed to go, which means I basically just have to keep doing what I'm doing and sit back. And now I literally, because of the debt calculator, I know exactly when I will have my debt paid off. And at this point,
That's the Credit Karma debt calculator, right?
Right.
Okay.
At this point, I set all that up. I had this plan. Everything's automated. It was telling me 18 months, which is less than my original 2-year goal. Great. And then I thought, now everything's set. I already have so much more peace about money in general. That opens up your bandwidth and your mental energy to be able to think about the 4th step, which is maximize. So that's, how could I create a side hustle that gives me even more income that I could throw at those balances and knock the debt out even faster, or asking for a raise or a promotion. Those are the 2 easiest ways to start. And then investing also falls into maximizing as well. But that took me a couple of years to get behind investing, because it can be pretty overwhelming when you're still, swimming in debt to think about investing your money. So I actually got a side job in addition to teaching at a cafe. And because all my expenses were already accounted for with the teaching job, I could throw all of my extra money, all my tips to my debt from the cafe job, even with just like 10 extra hours a week.
Was the cafe job something you only saw as temporary?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So that's a fairly simple step. But so you've got everything built by then, and now you're just looking for a way to speed things up by adding an additional cash flow source.
Exactly. But if the maximizing will never work if you don't build the initial plan, because then you won't even know, where you're throwing that extra money at.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Obviously, adding additional income stream is a topic in itself, so I don't think we need to go deep there. But I'm glad you have a nice, simple example. You took a second job as a waitress, was it?
Barista.
Okay, nice. So that's obviously available to a lot of people. They can potentially get that kind of job. Anything else we haven't covered in terms of any tools or steps or mindset that you think that people should know about?
That's it in a nutshell. The mindset thing is, telling everyone that you're doing it, depending on what you're like, can be really helpful, because then, people are asking you about it and keeping you accountable. And it can also be tricky because money brings up so much shame that when you tell people, oh, I'm watching what I spend, or no, I can't eat out anymore, sometimes I would get the reaction like they were taking it personally, like it was, me saying something about them and the way they spent money. So finding, doing it with people, bringing them into your process, or just letting them know ahead of time. So if you do change a habit, even if it's temporarily, they're not thrown off, and you can just figure out creative ways to do free things. But yeah, the mindset of it is once you have a plan, it's just incredibly empowering to be on top of your money for once, instead of always like swimming under it.
I am curious about one thing. You said, and I like this idea, make sure your balances are readily available from like just a thumb, scan sort of thing to open up the app.
Mhm.
Does that mean you have an app for each credit card you owed money to, and you would like open each 12 once a week? Is that how you would do it?
I think I had it for most of them. Yeah, I was between the apps on my phone and my Google Sheets, which just, each column was a credit card. Um, and so apps, this was, now I'm giving away my age, but 8 years ago. So I think the apps have gotten better since then.
Yes.
So for every credit card that I could do that with, yes. And that's really helpful. It's easy to get obsessive, but once you get into it, I thought it was really fun actually.
Okay, that's yeah. So I guess I mean obviously most modern banking systems have apps now for whatever they do, including their credit cards. So hopefully everyone will have an option like that. If not, I guess they have to maintain some other way of regularly checking it, which is probably online banking. Worst case scenario, phone banking maybe is a way to do it. It sounds almost ancient nowadays.
It does.
Yeah.
But the negotiating though, when you're in that step two, gets you really comfortable with the phone because most people now hate talking on the phone.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. Practice. Okay, so I mean, really, there's not too many, uh, secret tricks or tools here. It's just getting clear on your numbers, tracking everything, getting your base starting point, then setting up the automation using smart bank accounts. Obviously, if you're in America, you have the same ones that you have, Claire. If you're not, find something similar in your country, and then distribute the money. I love the choose the things you want to keep, and based on your emotional attachment to them and everything else, you might be surprised you're not as emotionally connected to them, so you can drop them. And then I mean, I can see how it'd be fun too, like you're saying, opening the app, seeing the snowball. When one disappears, you have a little party, and
Yes.
in your mind, probably mostly to begin with, but eventually the parties get bigger. I am curious then, like in terms of once this was all over, which happened in 12 months, and I guess I should clarify the reason it happened in 12 months instead of 24 months primarily was everything you've talked about, and perhaps most importantly, adding that secondary income stream as well. That would made a big difference, right?
Yeah, I was playing with the debt calculator. Literally, I know it's hard when you're like in survival mode to think of it as a game, but thinking of it as a game really helps. So playing around with the calculator and then the epiphany of realizing like if I could find just like $40 more in my budget somewhere or just in my incoming amounts somewhere, that would knock off a couple months of my debt repayment. So that realization, along with a few hours a week at the cafe,
Mm.
yeah, sped it up.
Yeah, I can see how doing your numbers and then going to the debt calculator with those numbers, that you can't use the debt calculator if you don't have those numbers, right?
Right.
Then gives you like almost like an ability to tell the future, and that makes things concrete. Obviously, I mean, I know you've dealt with clients. Has anyone ever come to you with an amount of debt that was so significant that it's almost overwhelming? And is there something, because like your debt was, especially for a 22-year-old, was significant, but it wasn't $250,000
Right.
sort of situation, right? So have you ever dealt with that kind of scenario?
Definitely. That the highest I've seen with the client is 600,000. I know, and I know there's higher. So I do feel lucky in that sense. I feel like I was able to get started relatively early, but the same rules apply. Where it starts to change is that maximizing step really comes into play then, because yeah, you can do a side hustle, but there's a whole art to asking for a raise or promotion too, and and charting what you're doing and your outcomes, and then quantifying the value that you bring to your company and asking for promotion in that way. That, so we focus more on the maximizing side of it, but again, in that sense, usually that amount of money is in student loans. Every time it's been student loans, someone who's gone to medical school, usually dentist, chiropractic, whatever it might be. Um, and so in that case, I still, I would recommend knocking out the credit cards first, because they usually are smaller than the student loans. They have those really high, like 25, 27 interest rate percentage, which is insane. And then usually they ask, well, I do also want to invest, and time is on your side when you invest early, but I have these huge student loans. And so you still do the debt snowball, but you start with knocking out any credit cards first. Then you look at putting that money that was going towards your credit cards into investing, while just chipping away at your student loans. And there's student loan forgiveness programs. You can manually add more to those amount each month and cut years and years off your payment plan.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up, Claire. Thank you for sharing the 4 steps, nice and clear. Obviously, the goal you set was pretty clear, and your outcome was even better than you expected. So that's fantastic. Last question: if people want to get more deep into what you're doing, do you have a website or anything like that?
I do have a website. It's myfinancialorganizer.com.
Awesome. And I'm assuming if people have any questions, if once we get this published, you're happy to answer them.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Okay. Thanks, Claire. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Thanks.